Well, some 10, 11 years ago, there was a huge controversy. I mean, let's throw back to what Ayo and Kayode were talking about, a federation and who's the federal government, etc., etc. There was a big controversy over whether or not the federal government should be saving money on behalf of the states. And that was as a result of calls for scrap of the excess crude account. That call, that controversy at that time yielded something which was quite instructive. It gave birth to the NSIA, that's a National Sovereign Investment Fund. Then a lot of the states signed up and the federal government signed up to invest in $1 billion initially in 2011. That was when the act was signed into law. And in 2012, the NSIA kicked off effectively. This is at least 11, 12 years down the line, and they have posted their how many years of consecutive profits. Well, we have the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority to tell us more about that this morning. Mr. Uche Orji is the Managing Director and the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, the NSIA. I think I mixed up the words. I think I said something about fund.
That's fine.
Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So how many years down the line, and this is where we currently are, we understand that the NSIA has posted at least 9 years of consecutive profits.
Correct.
How much can we say that we have gained from the initial 1 billion which was put in the kitty?
Okay, yes, so let's contextualize a few things. First, this is NSIA's 10th year of existence and is 9th year of profits, right? So 2021 for us was a very decent year. Although last time I appeared on this show, I did say it will not be as strong as 2020, which I believe was a blockbuster year for us. Many things went right for 2020.
Interesting about that. I mean, we'll come to the different years and the different challenges that you've had, but let's signpost the fact that 2020 was also the COVID year.
Correct.
So, I mean, if you say that it was a blockbuster year for you, there'll be questions to ask about how you went, went about that. But in all, when you look at an overview, $1 billion saved on behalf of the Federation, not the federal government, saved on behalf of the Federation in 2011 or 2012.
Yes.
And how much do we have in the kitty?
Correct. No, they're very simple. So 1 billion was initial contribution. A further 600 million was put in. Actually, it was 750. They withdrew 150 for COVID, if you remember that. And today, if I use the exchange rate of 416, which is 411, which is really what we use, the official rate, we are currently at $2.3 billion.
$2.3 billion.
Correct.
This is important because at that time, there were lots of questions. I mean, the controversy was so big. States said we could save by ourselves. We don't need the federal government to do it for us. And that 1 billion was a huge compromise on talking about the state. So one can only imagine if we had saved a lot more at that time and, what we most possibly would have in the kitty. But now tell us the how. How do you break it down? How were we able to achieve this much within such a time frame despite the headwinds we've seen internationally?
Of course. So 3 things. The first is the NSIA, the fund itself is actually 3 different funds. So there's a Future Generations Fund, which is a fund that is largely invested internationally. So we invest in public markets, private equity, venture capital, other alternative assets. And I think at the last count, we invested across more than 12 countries. Assets, so United States, Europe, Japan, China, all of that, including some in Nigeria. So that's the first fund, and that's the fund that actually delivered a lot of the returns for us. If you remember, 2020 was a very strong year for the global financial markets. And the reason was very simple. Yes, it was COVID, but people were getting paid. They were sitting at home. They were not spending, so all that money went to the capital markets. We saw that coming as a trend, and we actually reallocated our assets and put more in public markets in the US and in Europe. And that helped us make the returns of 2020 and some of the 2021 returns as well. The second fund is a stabilization fund. Now, this fund is almost like a checking account. It's a fund that we're required to write a check for the government in times of economic stress based on demonstrating need. And that was what happened in 2020. COVID, government needed $150 million. And through the process of the law, they came to us and were able to provide that money. That fund does not generate huge returns at all, because almost like checking account.
Your stabilization
7 days we must be able to provide the cash.
What percentage of the savings?
20%
is in the stabilization
correct,
account, okay.
And 40% is in Future Generations Fund.
Okay.
Then the third fund is the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. Now, this is the fund that's locally focused. And this is a fund that's invested in agriculture, in healthcare, in roads, in power, in financial markets infrastructure, as we call them. Many people haven't quite realized NSIA was a pioneer investor that delivered things like family homes funds, Nigerian Mortgage Financing Company, Development Bank of Nigeria, infra credits. These are all NSIA either developed or sponsored entities. So that fund also invests in those. And then we're also building what we call gas industrialization strategy. I think this show a year or 2 years ago, we talked about building an ammonia and diammonium phosphate plant with OCP of Morocco. So this fund does the local infrastructure. You know, I mean, local infrastructure, you're exposed to the currency challenges. Infrastructure is long gestation. It takes a long time before they start making money. So really, the bulk of our returns have come from what we've done through some of our international investing and some of the things we've done locally as well.
The third basket you called?
The Nigeria Infrastructure Fund.
The Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. I know that you've been in charge of the second Niger bridge for quite a while, and I know that it's nearing completion. Perhaps you speak a little more to that. But
sure. Let
me flip this to my colleagues in Lagos. I hope you guys are not going to start that conversation about federation and federal government.
We're always in that discussion as well.
Well, we'll try not to, at least for now. But I'm quite interested about the infrastructure fund, and I know Markwe was going to go into that, so maybe we should just talk about it, because, you know, the insecurity we're seeing has been linked to, you know, the economy and the poor indices we're seeing from poverty rate and all that. And it's also been linked to infrastructure deficit, you know, lack of good roads, hospitals, and all of that. I'm quite interested in that infrastructure fund, because the president had said earlier, I think it was last year, that we'll need about how much? $1.5 trillion to sort infrastructure in Nigeria. And I did the calculation, and I realized that that's like 30-something 2022 budget size, you know, 17 trillion times 30-something. And that's even, I mean, we're doing budget deficit financing, so it's not like we're making all that money anyway. But help us understand. You said we have about $2.3 billion now, so that's quite like ×2 where we started. Just how much of that are you biting? How much of that $1.7 trillion can we tackle from the infrastructure fund that we have? Because clearly we have a huge deficit.
Sure. Sure. No, completely understood. Now, there are two things I probably also want to add. The 2.3 is NSIA's core assets, okay? NSIA's core assets. The NSIA in its role also manages two other vehicles for the government. We manage what we call the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund. And so far, the commitment into that fund, and when it's fully funded, will be about under $1.7 billion. So we could be looking at total assets, core NSIA and under administration, on behalf of third parties like the federal government, of closer to 3.5 to 4 billion. That is, if you add those. We don't add those in our accounts. The accounts published this morning doesn't include those, because we manage those on behalf of the government. So what the government has done is to say, look, NSIA, you've proven that you can manage some infrastructure. How about we set up some vehicles for you to manage for us and use that to develop in those roads? And you also, as NSIA, can invest in those. And so that's the fund that is tackling Lagos-Ibadan Second Niger Bridge and Abuja-Kano Road. And we are actually not anywhere close to addressing the broad base of infrastructure deficits. But we are focused on addressing infrastructure that is commercial, not social, right? So commercial means infrastructure where we can earn money. So the roads, for example, will be tolled. And so we're taking a piece of that. Healthcare also, we've been very active in healthcare. We invested 2 years ago and developed 3 years ago, developed two types of centers. One was an oncology center in Lagos, which recently is now become break-even and is starting to turn a profit. We are now going on one step further now to roll out 23 healthcare programs across the country, including a center for advanced medicine here in Abuja, as well as other oncology centers, renal centers, diagnostic centers across the country. So we're taking a piece of this, which is healthcare, and making a significant impact there. On the roads, for a while, I think when we come on this show, people were doubtful whether the second Niger Bridge was actually a reality or not. You've seen that now. You know, it's almost there, almost there. Before the end of this year, I'm sure the phase 1 will be completed, and maybe early next year or late this year, it will be usable. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, we're still struggling with that, but we've made some substantial progress on that. I think we're somewhere close to 80% complete or 83% complete. Abuja-Kano Road, we're struggling there, but we've made progress on the Kaduna, Zaria, Kano, and that's almost done. Abuja-Kaduna is where we really need to make some significant progress. So in terms of overall, the areas of focus for us, and I think this is important, we're in roads, we're in power, we've started construction on a 10-megawatt solar power plant in Kano. We are also looking at a few things in hydro, as well as gas-fired power plants, especially the ones that the government have abandoned. We're looking to revive those. Agriculture, we have been managing the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative for the last 5 years. And I'm actually glad to announce that last year, 2021, that program turned a profit of about 10 billion naira. Now, it may sound small, but just think about the fact that this has been a big deficit for the government for as long as we can remember. It's been subsidy-driven. Okay. But we've managed to commercialize it and turn it into something that was actually a profit center. Well, and we're very proud of that. Other areas, and I'll just stop here because I know I'm rattling off a number of things. Yeah. But you're seeing us in financial markets, in infrastructure. You're seeing us in, I've mentioned healthcare. You're also now seeing us, I believe, in technology, which is an area where we've made some recent investments.
Well, I'm going to, if you don't mind me putting you on the stand right now and saying you have to commit to coming again, because there are too many questions that we would love to ask you, which we may not be able to get to today. But you said something earlier when Malcolm was tossing to us here in Lagos that you're struggling with the federal government thing as well. If you can quickly speak to that, because I know, I mean, you said it previously that there have been some struggles with some states. How is that going so far? Sure. What are the negotiations that need to take place that have not taken place? And how do we ensure that it doesn't get in the way of what you're doing?
No. Actually, I think we've made a significant progress on those. In the early days of the NSIA, and you were all part of that, you watched it play out, it was controversial. Actually, it was deeply controversial. And it was sad that we lost opportunity in the period of that controversy, because that was when we could have put a substantial amount of money into the NSIA, which, if the market had played out the way it's played out now, will have amounted to something really significant for the nation. Let me put in perspective for you. In 2012, when the NSIA started, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund was putting $1 billion a week into their Sovereign Wealth Fund, a week. We didn't put anything, apart from the initial $1 billion. It was in 2015. 2016 was the first time that we now got some $250 million contribution. So sovereign wealth funds are about contribution, and the controversy that was in the early stages, unfortunately, hobbled the organization from getting the right size of contribution. Obviously, today, all of that is resolved. We are working very, very well with the governors, working very well with the federal government and the local governments. Let me put in another number for you. The NSIA is owned 48% by the federal government and 52% by the states and local government. Every single local government, every state have a certificate of contribution. So when we make a profit, we divide it across everybody. So when you think about the NSIA, our shareholders is 774 local government, 36 states, FCT, area councils, and the federal government. And so in our dealings, and where the controversy tends to come in is, in terms of dealing with legislators, the federal legislature, the state legislature, and all that. But it's all about stakeholder management. These are shareholders. We treat all of them with the respect that shareholders command. But it's a long list of shareholders. So when I talk about the federal government versus federation thing, our struggle has evolved. It had been very difficult at the beginning, but now it really is about ensuring that we're able to make an impact across all our stakeholder groups. We do not have enough money for that, but we'll get there eventually, I hope.
Do you think that there could ever be a way that more Nigerians, I mean, this is a state thing now.
Yes.
But do you see a window, maybe a special basket or something, that Nigerians, everyday Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians could, through that, invest in the NSIA?
No, short answer, no. It will be difficult, and the reason is because we're not licensed to manage money for individuals. Anybody who's going to do that will have to get an SEC license. We're only authorized by law to manage money for the state, federal and local governments, okay? And so I think that's a very short answer to that.
What about the states? Because part of the controversy then was that, you know, the federal government was the one who had access to the excess crude account.
Correct.
Assuming the states, you know, some states thought, oh, we need some money from the money we have put into the NSIA, could they get access to it?
It would not be advisable to do so. You can't continue to eat your seed. That's just why you never grow, right? How much are we even talking about versus our budget, versus our potential as a country?
I'm just painting a scenario. However,
I agree.
However little, I mean, you've seen a lot of states and how,
I know.
you know, or maybe they say we want to put it in infrastructure. Just saying, maybe there's a particular project they'd like to invest in and they don't have the funds. Could they unilaterally say, we're going to approach the NSIA and we'll be asking for funds from them?
No, they don't ask for funds from us. They ask for co-investments with us.
Okay.
And that is encouraged, by the way. So we've had some states come and say, listen, we would like to do X, Y, Z in healthcare, we'd like to do X, Y, Z in roads, we'd like to do this in power. Can you collaborate with us? And listen, the federal government doesn't really own any land apart from the FCT, right? So all the investments that we are making, and we haven't had no footprint in the FCT, by the way, except this hospital we're planning now. All these investments are in states. I mean, our cancer center, and I thank God for that cancer center, was built in Lagos, right? It's in Louth, inside Louth. During COVID, that center saved people's lives. We had 5,000 unique patients with 150,000 therapists, radio and chemo, in that center. These people used to go to Dubai, used to go to Europe for treatment, but they couldn't go anymore. And we were charging less than 20% of what they would have paid in those countries for what is close to equivalent level of treatment. So, but it's not in the sky, it's in Lagos State, right? Kano, we're building a power plant. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is cut across 3 states. Second Niger Bridge is 2 states, it's Delta State, Anambra State. You know, so over time, I think the problem is that the size of the fund is still not big enough to cover as many places as it should. If it was 10 times the size of what it should be now, which it was envisaged to have been in 2012, it will make a significant level of impact. But we missed that opportunity and we're here, but we'll get there.
Well, one more question to ask the aspirants and perhaps the candidates when eventually they take on the hat. What's their plan for the NSIA? But we have to thank you so much for coming on this morning. As my colleague did say, it will be wonderful to have you back again to take on the plethora of questions that we have for you. Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Uche Oji is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority.